Did you know that in order to love yourself unconditionally, you must be self-centered? If you don't believe me, I'll explain it. Just stay tuned. Hi, my name is Michelle Fondin. I'm the author of 14 published books, including my latest books, Love Me Unconditionally, a spiritual guide to self-love and inner peace, and the companion workbook to Love Me Unconditionally. You can get these books on Amazon, Ingram Spark, and if you want author-signed copies, go to my website, lovemeunconditionally.com. If you're new to this channel, I want to welcome you here. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for subscribing. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Okay, here we are talking about self-centeredness in unconditional love. Now, I want to first define that in the way that I mean it. So in my latest book, in this book, in the opening chapter, I explain the difference between being selfish and self-centered. So the way I conceive of it is selfish is when you don't consider others at all in your equation. We all know people that are selfish, but you can also be selfish, and I'll explain that too. I can also be selfish, I'll explain that too. But self-centered, as I conceive of it, is centered within the self. Finding yourself as the center point of your life. The late Bob Proctor said, "We are often in a supporting role in our own movie. We're very rarely the lead in our own movie because we make it that way. We make ourselves the supporting actors in our movie and not the lead." That's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you have to be centered within yourself, knowing your wants, needs, desires, goals, having the self-esteem, the self-worth, and the self-love to be able to lead your life in the way that you want to live it. Most people are not doing that. They're not the lead in their own play or movie. They're not centered within themselves and being authentic and true to themselves and knowing exactly how they would like to live their lives. This might be you. Now, you might want to wonder why. Why are most people not centered within themselves? In other words, self-centered. The reason is because for our entire lives, we've been called to please others, to fill others' agenda, including our parents, including our siblings, including our church, our school, our teachers, our society, our bosses. So we've been taught that our needs don't really matter, our desires don't really matter. In other words, we are asked to play it small in order to fit in order to make others happy, in order to keep the peace, in order to be a part of an organization, such as a family is an organization, by the way. So we are taught that we really can't stand out from the crowd. If we do, then we're being selfish, right? And that's not at all what it is. As I mentioned, selfishness is the lack of considering anyone else beside yourself. And we are all guilty of this at some time. Here's the issue. If you are not self-centered, in other words, centered within the self, if you're not self-centered, you become selfish. And we do this because we all have needs that must be fulfilled. We all have them. Just because you deny them or suppress them or ignore them doesn't mean you don't have needs. Of course you have needs. I have needs too. But it's when we suppress them for so long or ignore them for so long that then we become selfish. Because like a 2-year-old child or a 3-year-old child, those needs will surface and they will start screaming at you very loudly. Have you ever ignored your need to eat food? For example, your need of hunger and fulfilling that hunger, satiating that hunger? Well, if you ignore it long enough, that is the only thing you could possibly think about. And that anyone that gets in your way better watch out, because you might scream and shout and slam doors and storm off because you've been ignoring yourself. You were not centered within yourself, noticing those early hunger pangs and answering the need before it became a monster, right? And that goes with any need. And so it's by not being self-centered that we become selfish. There are a lot of people today on social media, and you can see it everywhere. You can even see it in books on Amazon, for example. There is this big movement to call people narcissists, right? There's this huge movement. It seems that everybody these days is a narcissist, according to social media, according to books, podcasts even. Or even in common conversation, you do hear this, right? Oh, my boyfriend was a narcissist. My wife was a narcissist. My husband was a narcissist. My whatever. My mother was always a narcissist. I'd like to replace the word narcissist, since most people, I would say 99% of the population, are not clinically narcissists. They are selfish based on unmet needs, right? They were not centered in themselves. And since they were not centered in themselves, maybe in childhood, maybe they were always trying to live up to somebody else's standards to please somebody else, such as a set of parents, that then they became selfish because they continued to ignore their needs and they were not centered within themselves. They were always trying to, or are always trying to live up to another person's standards, right? So I would like to caution you to call someone a narcissist or selfish, for example, because if you are blaming another person, basically, have you ever heard the expression where, like, if you point the finger at someone, there are 4 fingers pointed back at you, right? For me, I don't know, point. I don't know, how would I point? I never learned, like, early on, I learned not to point. So, but if you point a finger at someone, you've got 4 fingers pointed back at yourself. So I typically feel that if someone is accusing another person of being a narcissist, it's that there's some of that within you, right? Usually it means, if you call someone selfish, if you call someone a narcissist, usually it means like, you are not fulfilling my needs and what I want. Therefore, you are a narcissist. In the same way, if you're calling someone selfish, you're usually saying, you, person I'm in a relationship with, you are not filling my agenda, and that makes you selfish. And certainly there are people who are ignoring themselves enough throughout their entire lives. They're ignoring themselves enough. They're not even remotely centered within themselves. They're so far away from themselves that they don't even know themselves well enough to be self-centered. That yes, they display selfish behavior because it is more important to them to gain approval from others or to try to show prominence in a position, in a marriage, in a whatever, right? They're trying to show a position of prominence, but what is showing that position of prominence for? It's to try to have all eyes on them because they're expecting some sort of external feedback. And when you are expecting some sort of external feedback, that's not being centered within yourself. Because when you are centered within yourself, the only feedback you really need is your own feedback, right? So when you're centered within yourself, you are in a constant self-feedback loop. And that keeps you happy and joyful. That keeps your cup filled. It's when your cup is empty that you become more selfish, or that others become more selfish, right? Now, I want to address the final thing about selfishness, and certainly this is a topic we can address with other adjacent topics from my book and talking about unconditional self-love. First of all, unconditional self-love does not make you selfish. It makes you totally the opposite of selfish, okay? I would wager to say it makes you centered within the self. So it makes you healthier. I'd like to say something about selfishness because some people are really convinced that someone they are in a relationship with, whether it's a family member, friend, or lover, that they have their own agenda. They're really selfish. Like I said, narcissist is a word that's played around with a lot. And a lot of people in those types of roles or positions where they are not centered within themselves, they tend to be power seeking, right? In a relationship, they tend to seek a position of dominance over the other. And I know, my head is not in the sand. I know that's why a lot of people are saying, oh, they're narcissists, but let's look at it from an external perspective. The person who is seeking power over another in a relationship is extremely insecure because they are not fulfilling their own needs first. Like I said, they're seeking something outside of themselves. So they are so far away from themselves. And so the seeking of power over another person is someone who is very weak, right? And so they become selfish because they are weakened. And why are they weakened? They're weakened because they cannot give themselves the love that everyone needs to give to themselves. They can't do it because they haven't been taught to do it. They haven't been taught to really fulfill their needs. And I'm not talking about material needs necessarily, right? I'm talking about giving themselves a validation, giving themselves accolades, giving themselves permission to be proud for their accomplishments and what they're doing in life. They're not allowed, through some sort of thing in their upbringing, they were not allowed to self-congratulate. They were not allowed to boast about themselves in a nice way, right? Say like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. I accomplished an A on that test, or I'm really proud of myself. I learned how to ride this bike all by myself. So since they were not allowed to give themselves positive feedback, that's why a person would then become more selfish rather than centered within the self. And when it goes so far off the center, right? When it goes so far in one direction, that is when they would seek power over others in a relationship. But that does not make them strong. That makes them extremely weak, right? And we should be saddened, if you will. I'm trying to think of a better word for the person who is in that position, because you know for certain that they do not love themselves. Even if they strut around like a rooster saying they love themselves, or they strut around saying like, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, that's not how they feel. That's just what they're saying. That's not how they feel. Their self-talk is a lot more negative if they are in that position. So in order to love yourself unconditionally, you have to be centered within yourself. You have to be totally in tune with your wants, needs, desires, goals, your feelings, right? You need to constantly do check-ins with yourself to see how you are doing in every moment and to fill your needs first. Then when your cup is full, you will have the capacity to extend that love outward. And that is everything that I teach, that everything in your life will get better when you love yourself unconditionally. So I want to thank you so much for joining me here today and on my channel. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and thank you for giving the video a thumbs up, engaging in the comment section below, and sharing this with others who you know need to work on their self-love, self-esteem, self-worth, and really getting in touch with themselves on an authentic level, on a core level. I want to thank you for your interest in my work. You can certainly pick up my published books on my website, on Amazon, and on Ingram Spark. You can join one of my online courses. The links are all below, and I will see you in the next video.